Welcome, Rip It Up, Start Again. We're back here with a live episode at Disruptive Live Studios. Thank you for tuning in. So, the Twitter feed will be on your screens. Please send in questions that you have and we will try and include those in the panel session after you've heard from our speakers. We have three fabulous speakers here today, a little bit towards VR more than anything else, but they are disruptive leaders in their areas and I'm really happy to welcome them on Rip It Up, Start Again. Thanks to Disruptive Live for having us in their studio here in London. So a little background on Rip It Up, Start Again, why I started this back at the beginning of April. It was April 2016. I came across so many people who were creating disruptive business models using technology and they weren't being heard. And the big boys needed to hear about it and everybody needed to hear about it. So I created this stage so that we could all see what was happening and how technology was being challenged and used. And that is the point of Rip It Up, Start Again. So any of you out there who want to have some space here at Rip It Up, Start Again, reach out to me. We have a Facebook community. We have my emails, lulu@ripitup.co, and please contact me, anyone who is a disruptor and leading the way. So I'm going to welcome our first speaker here today, Barry. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Lulu. So, I'm Barry Whyte, and I'm founder of a business called Veero. We run pop-up virtual reality cinema events all over the UK. And I want to start this 4 minutes that I have with you talking a little bit about Ready Player One. Some of you may have seen Ready Player One, the film, Steven Spielberg film, earlier this year. Some of you might have read the book. But for those of you who haven't, it's a near future dystopia, and it's all about a world where the Earth has really started to fall apart, and everyone lives in this virtual reality simulation called the Oasis. I think it's interesting, not only because it, really was a moment when, in my eyes, virtual reality moved from being a sort of geeky culture to something really quite mainstream in Hollywood, but it also raises some really big questions around the role we want virtual reality to have in our lives. In Ready Player One, everyone spends their entire life in a simulation. And, if you look at some images that tech companies are throwing out there right now, it looks like a lot of people in the tech world actually think this might be a reality. Just to, illustrate this a little bit, I went to this talk. Maybe it was around 2 years ago, just before PlayStation VR was launched. And PlayStation had these sort of massive posters all around the venue with families sitting all together. Everyone, mother, father, kids, like granny, all of them had VR headsets on, all sitting in a row together on the family sofa. And I don't know what your family looks like, but my family never really looks like that. It's just not realistic. People don't want to sit at home with these things on. But that doesn't mean they don't want to use VR. Virtual reality is incredible, it's fantastic. There's big demand for this out there. Sales of VR headsets have been below analyst expectations, but the big unexpected growth area has been out-of-home VR. And that's the area that I'm really interested in. Now, I run pop-up VR cinema events. What does that actually mean? Let me talk a bit about what virtual reality cinema looks like and feels like. So when you have a VR headset on like this, you are engaged in the narrative. You're basically part of the story. You can look left, right, up, down, all the way around, whatever you want. And rather than just being a passive observer, you're sort of an active participant. Doesn't necessarily mean it's interactive, but it means that you feel as if you are engaged in whatever story a director or a filmmaker is trying to set up. It's not a game, it's very much like going to the movies. I personally believe people want to go and engage in that sort of experience with their friends, their partners, their colleagues. They want to go somewhere, just like you go to a cinema. It needs to be an out-of-home experience, and that's what we're trying to create. So if you come along to one of our events, you'll see a bunch of VR headsets all set up in the same room, and everyone watches the same piece of content at the same time. It becomes a social experience. There's some great bits of VR content coming to the market. If you look at any of the world's major film festivals, Cannes, South by Southwest, Tribeca, they all have major VR categories. And what we want to do is give those filmmakers a commercial platform that they can use to actually sell tickets to bring audiences to see their films. If you're interested in this, check us out. The business is called Veero. At the bottom of the screen, you can see how it's spelled. Check out veero.co. You can also get in touch with me at BT Whyte. Thank you very much.
My name is Luciana Carvalho, and in keeping with the theme of VR, I'm going to explore a little bit further what the power of VR is beyond just the out-of-home entertainment and going into actually the homes of everyone out there. But looking at VR not just as a medium and an end in and of itself, but actually what it enables us to do and how tech can actually augment our humanity in a sense. So my background is law and business, and I've been working in startups in different disruptive industries for about 6 years. About 2-3 years ago, I worked on a startup that was getting children with learning disabilities and putting them in a VR experience where we were creating simulated worlds, like 3D worlds, where you can essentially engage a child through spatial and visual learning, and actually found that children who were severely dyslexic had an uptake, retain information, over 90%. Actually, one of the anecdotes that I say, I cried and found out this is actually my mission in life, was to apply VR and what we call VR for good, was when I had a 9-year-old child who, upon getting there, was a little bit kind of saying she didn't really know, she was stupid, and she didn't really do well in school. But within an hour of interacting with a gamified platform that allowed her to get over text, which was her main difficulty, she was saying, oh, maybe I'm not so stupid after all. And that hit a spot where I thought, we're looking at and how we can take VR, which has been traditionally associated with gaming, with entertainment, with television, and apply it to things like training, apply it to things like education, look at how children can, obviously, taking into account different implications of that, but actually look at how it can enhance learning. And particularly, fast forward to beginning of last year, mid last year, I joined a company called Rewind, where it's a studio based in the UK that works in XR, so virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. And throughout my journey of working behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, of doing business development and general evangelism of the power of VR, one of the areas that has interested me the most is diversity. To touch a little bit on what Barry said about it being an experience where you're no longer a passive participant but an active, actually the uptake of going through a VR experience is that you can affect cognitive behavioral change. Your brain perceives it like it's a real memory. So if you think about the impact that has on for psychological the problems, for therapy, it's been used, and not many people know this, but VR has actually been used in psychology and therapy for over 30 years. And the effects have been measured and scientifically proven. Now, if we look at something that is a very prominent issue these days, and something that's very close to my heart, given that I'm a big diversity advocate and have founded Women in VR, it's called Unfold, for the past 3 years, it's unconscious bias and diversity. And we're sitting now at a golden moment where we can actually reach not just men, women. We can build an industry from the ground up. And what we're doing at Unfold is powering underrepresented voices just beyond women. I'm unfortunately out of time. I could stay here and talk about this forever, and hopefully we can touch upon it during the panel. But if you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm at LCarvalhose, which is my surname. You can reach me at Luciana at Says Solutions. And I'm going to hand over to our last but not least speaker, Shelley. Thank you very much.
So, I'm really thrilled to be here today. I thought that I would talk about the random walk that I took to end up where I am today. The subject of this little mini talk is the random path. About 2 years ago, I saw this horrible image of that baby who washed up on the beach island, like everybody else in Europe, who was a family of a refugee child. And that just really struck me. And at the time I was building mobile apps for communities. I was addressing what I thought was a huge need for people who had a large community, whether it was a musician or a celebrity or a company that had big customer base. I was helping them get contact directly with their fans and their community through mobile apps. And so I had this wonderful tech platform that allowed us to spin up these apps really quickly. But seeing that baby on the beach, I was struck, like probably everyone else, with this pain and the thought that I've got to be able to do something. And a lot of my friends were running off to Calais to help to volunteer, or to Greece, and I have investors and employees and a company, and I couldn't do that. So I thought, what can I possibly do with the technology platform that I have in order to be able to help these people who were running from war or famine or poverty? And these are adults with their children who were independent in their own country, and they get here suddenly to Europe and they don't have a clue as to how to find a doctor, where to find a job, or any of that. So I thought, well, what can I do with my mobile apps? And our mobile apps specialize in geolocation and all kinds of real-time data. And so I talked to some of the nonprofit organizations and asked them, would it be helpful to have an app that showed all the services that were available on the mobile phone, nearest to the people, on a little pin on a map? And they all said that would be really great. So over the course of a weekend, we spun up this app, which is called the Refugee Aid app. And that is a kind of a marketplace between legitimate, official nonprofits and cities' services that are made available to the people who need them, which is the immigrants and the refugees. And that was a grassroots kind of organic marketing that happened, and it's now in 22 countries. We have 5,000 organizations using that platform. And what it does is really gets rid of the inefficiency between the communication that used to be done by paper and, walls, like in the different nonprofit organizations, walls filled with the numbers of doctors and services and what have you. We put it onto a mobile app and it just makes everything super efficient, have greater impact, and save money. It was so successful without spending any money, just my time and the support of our investors, that it gave me great insight into how technology can actually be used to increase the efficiency and to give people the help that they need. So this passion project, which was something that we were just doing on the side, actually became the basis of our new commercial product, which is the LifeSpots app and platform. And we are just like those refugees. We're not in such challenging situations, but most of us have a family where there might be someone who's disabled, who needs disability transport, or an older grandmother who needs babysitting, or we might need some kind of financial advice when we lost our job. So all of us need help at some point or another. And what I realized is that what we learned with this passion project, RefAid, gave me the insight into how the whole nonprofit and the public sector work in terms of delivering their services. And so 2 years ago, we started that passion project, and over the last year, totally pivoted the company to focus purely on this LifeSpots app that puts the help that you need in the palm of your hand when you need it and where you need it, so that the nonprofits and public service providers can communicate directly with the public through this public-facing app. And I think that the moral of the story is that it's really a great thing to be able to listen to what you're passionate about and to follow that path, and it can lead to tremendous business opportunities, and that's what's happened to me. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. That's been amazing. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Luciana. And thank you, Barry. So we're going to cut just to a video now so we can organise the panel back on and we can drill down into the real questions of what are the problems that we're solving today through tech and through the disruption that is allowing these guys with real vision. So we're going to cut to a video and we'll be with you, back with you shortly.
It's always worth doing a rehearsal before, because it's actually what screws up.
Hi, welcome back to Rip It Up, Start Again. Now we've got the panel here, so Barry's with us, Luciana and Shelley's with us, so we can all talk. Any questions that you've sent through via Twitter, we'll pick that up from the audience and they'll chuck that at us at any point in time. So very casual, but I'm going to lead off by asking the panel, and I hope we're going to debate rigorously together. We're not going to talk politics. I have made that a statement. I don't want to hear the word Trump. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what large problem do you believe that you're solving? Who wants to kick that off? You were the first speaker, but do you want to go, Luciana?
Yeah, when it comes to so really looking at diversity, I feel like we've just touched, it's almost like it's an iceberg, and we're touching the very sort of the outer layer. We're not going deep enough. If you look at the subject of unconscious bias and the way that it's been tackled forever, this is something that is formed around 5 to 7, and there are so many different layers that it becomes impossible for you to dictate what one influence was. It's parenting, it's teachers, it's colleagues, it's media, it's culture. It depends on nationalities, it depends on your upbringing. There's so many different layers. So in order to change such ingrained patterns of thinking, something like like VR that immerses you in what is the closest to being in the shoes of another can have a greater impact more than we've seen before. So really, I'd love to be able to get people to understand their deepest biases. I have bias. If you have a brain, you're biased. We all have biases.
I think the difficulty is we don't know.
We don't know, exactly.
We don't know our biases.
Exactly.
And what I find fascinating about VR, which I hadn't thought about before, in fact, we had a discussion earlier, Barry, with regards to how you were bringing training in to show people, for example, if you're sat in a wheelchair, you're disabled, you're at a function, and you're being passed business cards over the top of your head. Now, if you can get people, CEOs of companies or whomever, to sit in that position, wow.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that will completely change. It's like VCs, you know, when you're raising money.
Absolutely.
You know, how do most VCs act towards women investors, the conversational tone and how they pose their questions versus men? It's not because, you know, they're necessarily being bigoted, it's just that they're frankly...
And not intentionally at all.
It's not intentional at all, but it's just sort of, you know, it's learned behaviour from the way they were brought up by their mothers or whatever it is. They need training, right?
Yeah.
And virtual reality can bring this training. I think this is really interesting.
Yeah.
Barry, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, you know, I think VR, we've yet to work out how VR as a technology can best be implemented or used. A lot of effort has been put into selling VR headsets at home, but people aren't really going to sit at home and put on a VR headset and engage in the training program. I think incorporating VR into existing training programs that might be taking place on subjects such as unconscious bias suddenly just brings them to life in a way that, you know, they're just not brought to life if you're just reading from a textbook. And it goes beyond just unconscious bias, I guess. We can think about general leadership training. You know, if you've got to give a presentation, actually standing in front of an audience in a conference hall and just knowing what that feels like months in advance of having to give that talk, that's really powerful. It can help give people confidence in a way that traditional training just doesn't really do.
So you two are both obviously fixed on solving this problem, using VR to normalise, if you like, unbiasedness.
It's tech in general. I'm really interested in like where tech meets humanity, and I think we all are, and how we can. I usually say let's build bridges, not walls, using tech. Nice. Not to get into politics, but really,
not to talk about Trump.
I just had to slide. No, I'm joking. But the idea is that if we use tech not as like an end all, and not something like with virtual reality, for example, or new technologies like blockchain or AI, not something that's dividing us more, but actually bringing us closer together. So to actually use tech that gets us to understand one another is so powerful.
Transparency and collaboration. I mean, we
Absolutely.
always seem to come back to that in this panel.
Yeah.
Shelley, what about you? What's the big problem that you want to solve if you haven't already? Because you've solved quite a few, to be fair.
I'm
Not
not
to
sure
say you've
that
been
we've
around.
solved, but we're working. I've been around a long time, so I have worked on quite a few problems. But I think that the kind of thing that Barry and Luciana are working on, which is to help people, I think that my platform, my LiveSpots public app, the focus of that is to help people like these guys who have solutions let other people know that there are solutions to their problems. And our focus is primarily the services that are available from nonprofits and local authorities in cities. There's huge amounts of money being spent by them to solve problems, and most of us wouldn't have a clue who to go to if we actually had help. You know, if some horrible thing happened to us and we were out on the street, or if we lost our medical coverage or whatever, we would not know that there actually is probably a service right near us. If we were homeless, most of us can't really identify with that, but if we were homeless, okay, so maybe you sleep in a really not such a great place, but if you can find food at a food bank, at least you're going to make it through to the next day to have enough energy to maybe get a job and get a permanent address and all the other things. So we have so many problems in society. In the U.S., the nonprofit services spend $1.7 trillion a year in delivering services. That's just in the U.S. It's a massive market. Nonprofit services, if they were a country, would be the 5th largest in the world in terms of revenue. And 10% of Americans actually work for nonprofits. So it's like such a huge thing. There's so many things available, and yet it's an industry that has been primarily using paper and old world tools to solve, you know, more and more problems, thanks to people like the one we won't mention today. There's just more and more problems in society. More and more people are the victims of racial and gender hate and yet there's solutions there, and it's just kind of creating the link between the two using technology for that, and you know, it doesn't really cost much to do that.
Well, that segues really nicely onto my second question. My second question is really around trust. Okay, because obviously technology is an unknown to a lot of us. I mean, you know, the people on this panel understand technology. They understand, you know, the stretch of it, how it delivers, how it works, how it operates. But, you know, to everybody out there, consumers, how do we get them to trust what we're doing and that it is actually connecting for the benefit of all?
Well, I think that the most important thing is education. I think people trusted without good reason the GAFA companies, the Facebook and the Googles of the world, giving away all of their personal information that's been used to create presidents that were not voted for and all kinds of other horrible things. And I think that the first step is to get people to understand what it is that they actually own, like the data, the personal data that they have. And then for those of us who want to be kind of socially responsible is for us to use that in, at worst, benign ways, but at best in socially responsible, positive ways. So what we do is we collect as little information as possible because we don't want to be hacked. Everybody can be hacked. If the CIA can be hacked, everybody can be hacked. So we just don't want to collect a lot of data that can then be used against people. We don't want to know the real names of the refugees on our refugee app. On our app for the public, we don't mind knowing the name, but we don't want to gather the kinds of things that could then lead to Big Brother state and the kind of things that are going on. So it's really a lot of education that has to happen. And then we have to communicate as tech providers, we have to communicate with the public as to what we're actually doing and why it matters.
So it's communication. What about
I think
your sphere?
I was thinking of two different strands, but from the VR standpoint and emerging technology as a whole, so VR, AR, augmented reality, and mixed reality. The Magic Leap was recently released, and this entire new barrier of, I guess, spatial computing has a bit of a, I think we're managing expectations, and it's really interesting to see how people react to it. On one end, there is the issue of literal consumer behavior, of trust in putting a headset in your head and completely, getting rid of your surroundings. That's massive, and in order for us to do that, it'll take time. But the other thing is, what I think is interesting, what you mentioned, Facebook. Oculus is the Oculus Go is the most widely and most giftable headset out there. So it's quite widely available and accessible, I guess, for the end consumer. But it's owned by Facebook. So what does that mean? Because no longer will you have just information that is collected, but actual data from eye gazing, but potentially even biometric data.
And you can imagine
there are no answers now.
You can imagine how that could be used against you as a citizen. They know everything about you because of your school and all your behaviors on Facebook, but then what you look at in a visual environment, they could create visual environments for you when you go into a department store, that the windows turn into the field, or they turn into the killing ground, or to whatever those things are that they know are going to influence your behavior. And are those the people that we want, unelected officials of Google and Facebook? Are they the ones that we want to be dictating our behaviors in our daily life?
Because it's ironic, isn't it? They have a closed ecosystem to control their data, and they suddenly realize, oh my gosh, we're not actually understanding the activity of all our communities outside of Facebook. We need to create that bridge.
We need to own the walls, we need to own everything, all the screens, everything.
Yeah, education, definitely. I think is key.
And it's bringing about more disruptors, actually, which, again, is quite a nice segue to when you guys, because I will obviously classify you as all disruptors. You question the status quo. That's the key to it. And you know that technology will deliver pretty much anything as long as the brief is right. You identify needs directly, immediately, and then you get technology to delete that, to deliver that. So how have you, in your experience to date, validated your ideas? And this is really just speaking to the audience out there that are sort of either disruptors that are shy to step forward, or disruptors that are out there and they're doing it. They want validation from you guys, to hear from your story of validation, to just learn, I guess.
As a tech startup, I guess I have a really basic pattern that I follow anytime I'm about to start something. I start first with the competitive landscape, and I look at what is the space I'm kind of interested in. I look at all the players who are either directly competing or nearby that are kind of related, and then I figure out what do they all have in common and where are there some missing pieces, and I focus on making sure that we include all of the things that are standard that people would expect, but also focus on the sweet spots so that it's very easy to differentiate. So that's the first step. But the next step is to build the tech relatively inexpensively, because nowadays you can't get any funding if you don't actually have a real thing and real users. So that means you have to either know how to build it yourself, or you have to have some of your own money to hire developers to build whatever this tech thing is. And then you just get it out there. Like with our Ref8 app, we just threw it up on a weekend, and I just started cold calling myself to these organizations and said, do you want to use it? I mean, I knew it worked, but maybe it could have improved, but I didn't worry about perfection. I just said, okay, here's something that actually works, and this is something, are you interested in? So I think you have to get into the trenches. I actually get on the phone and I cold call people, and I get them actually using it, and there's no such thing as betas anymore. Everything is 100% what you get, what you see is what you get, and I think it's really important that you get something out there really quickly instead of this long, drawn-out process of a business plan and user testing and all that kind of stuff. There's nothing like real-life testing.
Oh yeah, there's a business plan is, God, hit a nail on the head. Absolutely, it's about not kind of hesitating or wanting your idea or to validate every single point or to know exactly how you're going to go about it. No, you live, to be a disruptor or someone who is actually taking the plunge, you fail. And I know this is very cliched of startups, you fail, you get back up, but it's true. You've got to have that resilience of, you're going to go out there and you might get screwed over and you might fail, but just learn from that. Okay, where are the weak points, and then go out there. And for me, the most important thing is feedback from everyone. Just listen to whoever you're building it for, because you're not building it as this is my tech to you. It's actually this is a tech for you, and you're solving a need.
You like to add?
Yeah, I always think of two different things in this space. So, firstly, ideas will change, they will evolve, they will grow, never be precious about them. And secondly, ideas are lovely, but they're kind of useless unless you have execution. And to bring those two things together, just getting an idea to market, as both of you have just said, doing that really quickly, and then just standing back and observing what path it takes, and being flexible enough and confident enough in the sort of core initial thought that you don't care if it kind of changes or evolves in a slightly different direction. That's a good thing. Getting that sort of product market fit and being led by your customers is really central to just getting that idea out there. I don't know a single business that's successful where the final product remotely resembles the initial idea. Everything changes. And I think that flexibility, and that's only achieved through execution, rapid execution, is just central to doing something well.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't jump to the top of the mountain. You've actually got to climb and take people with you, haven't you?
I think just in general, the world is moving to a point in which we're more led by purpose and your mission and your values more than anything else, rather than just kind of, trying to be a little square box. Your mission is as important as what you're, how you get that off the ground.
I think that's the thing that's should be inspiring to aspiring entrepreneurs and technologists, is that sure, everybody wants to have something as successful as a Facebook, but the Facebooks will probably not be here in 5 or 10 years, and probably the mistake that they have made is not having any mission or purpose that resonated with good. And so there's a ton of opportunities to overcome the past old way of doing things and come up with ways for people to connect with each other, but not invasive, not all controlling. And I think that's the exciting thing. Is
paying it forward.
Yes.
That's. I mean, I think the purpose. You nailed it on the head. And in fact, I think at Disruption Live, they had a whole stream on. It was just purpose. Really, really inclusive, transparent, and collaborative. I think it comes back to that. So what about scale? I mean, it is about business. It is about making money. How are you guys gonna scale, or what have you been looking at to enable you to scale, or is it too soon in some of your cases?
Well, I'm what I would call an extreme bootstrapper, and I have had investment, but because we had such a massive pivot, we raised money for something 4 years ago that You know, it was way too soon, and nobody believed anything I said about Facebook taking your data and taking away your access to your customers and your fans. And so I was like hitting my head against the wall. I think so I couldn't, you know, after that was not such a huge success. Pivoting was a massive success, but it didn't have any real money behind it. And I think scaling, you have to hold, like for me, we started in 2 countries with this one for the refugees that then inspired me into the one for everyone. We had to think global the whole time. And how do you do that? Well, you do it with your own hard work. It's not easy, especially for me. I'm not the right fit for most VCs. I don't look the way they do. I'm not the right gender, not the right age, not the right sex.
You shocked me. You shocked me.
It's not that easy raising money. This time, 10 years ago, it was a lot easier. But this time, it's not that easy. And the thing is, it's really about bootstrapping. But you have to think of scale, because no business is ever going to succeed if you're not big enough, right? So because I'm from the US, which is a massive country, I always start everything the US, the UK, and maybe one other country, and I always keep that in mind. And now we're in 22 countries, and people say, that's ridiculous. How can such a small company have, you know, in so many places, how can you manage it? It's like, we just do it because you have to do it. You can't, it doesn't work anymore to scale just in one tiny little country.
But I mean, is it very simplistic? The governments go, here's the API, open API. You know, is it how hard has it been to get to the 22 countries? Yeah.
Oh, nobody has any APIs in the
really?
GovTech or in the nonprofit space. No. We had the thing that our business was all about is I thought we were just giving people the help they need on their phone, and that was like the technology challenge. But no, what we found out is that the service providers, the government and nonprofits, didn't have it written down, let alone in an Excel or in a database. So we couldn't take it from an API because they had to first start with writing it down into a piece of paper and then putting it into Excel, and then we did a bulk upload of it. So the challenge that we set out was not the challenge that we ended up having to deal with, which was how do you digitize like all these services, that $1.7 trillion worth of services in the US was not in a database. And so we are the first company ever to map all of those services all over the world, to put them in one single database. So yeah, it's very old school, like moving forward like an inch at a time, and
it really is a steep staircase, basically.
Yeah, and I think most success comes down to like picking up the phone and actually talking to people and emailing them. And there's no such thing as really viral. Like it was.
Maybe for cat videos on YouTube.
Yeah, cat videos. There's grassroots. People like hear about something that they like and they tell other people, but you know, you still have to talk to people. That's what we do all day long, is talk to people. I do that all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think definitely in that spirit, it's about collaboration and partnership. Like for example, with the diversity in VR, diversity in tech, and women in tech, there are countless organizations out there, and networks and meetups that are all looking at the same thing. So I was never like, I'm going to reinvent the wheel, or I'm just going to create an unconscious bias program off the ground. Like Barry said, it's looking at what's out there, where they are, how it can fit in. And I've never underestimated the importance of asking for help when I need it, of connecting with potential mentors. And I hope everyone in the audience can know they can reach out to us at any point. But I think that's really crucial to ask for help, to know where you're going, but see what's out there and who can help you. Yeah. And actually, there are untapped resources in public and private that you can potentially access.
I mean, that was part of the whole idea for Rip It Up, was to create this sanctum of disruptors that everybody could reach to and speak to. So that what happens is it's not just the people in the news necessarily are helping people out, it's people that resonate and understand. And so, we are wanting to shift Rip It Up into a platform and develop that. Obviously, I'm looking for sponsorship, so anybody that wants to help me, please let me know. But no, that's really interesting. But what changes? I want to talk a little bit about changes. What changes are you guys investing in or looking at to develop your immediate future?
I just wanted to jump in with the disruptor thing, though, first, because I really challenge the idea of disruption for its own sake. And I think there's just too much of that out there, that people think, I want to change something. Some things might not be broken and might not need to change. And change in and of itself is not a goal. It's really not a destination. So I think it's more about finding real solutions to real problems. And sometimes it means you have to throw out the way that things have been done, which is your Rip It Up idea, but sometimes it's not that. Like, we can't single-handedly change the entire nonprofit and government services space because it's so massive. So we have to work with what there is and then do incremental improvements. And so I just think it's important to challenge the idea of disruption for its own sake.
Yeah. No, I think that's very valid. Yeah, absolutely. What about you, change? What a change.
Change. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I think as you progress an idea and as it evolves, you kind of you have to have some tolerance for that idea just taking a life of its own and going in a slightly different direction. So when we set out last year, our plan was to open a physical virtual reality cinema in London, but it became very apparent very quickly that there just wasn't enough content out there that was really good and really commercial. Lots of great VR content, but not that much you'd want to pay money for, not much you'd want to buy a ticket to see. So that's the area of change, I guess, that's affected my business plan most over the course of the past month. Just having to think about, hey, what sort of contents could I invest in that could actually make real commercial gains? And that's a completely different place to where I started.
Yeah, of course.
Although the general territory is pretty much the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had to, in order to launch a business that maps every single public and community service provider, which is a massive ambition, we had to make it free so that every single one of them could list their services free, like the old white pages, right? Because nobody's going to pay for something they don't know that they need because they've never seen it before. So I thought, okay, that's great. We're just going to let everybody use it for free, but how do I pay for that? So one of the things I had to really, I mean, I'm still totally committed to that, but I'm not the perfect candidate for VC funding of 40 million, which I could use right now if anybody's listening. But so then how do I finance that? And we had to think about what are the ways that we can finance free. And so, because there are paid tiers, but you still need everyone in there to get a network effect. And that's a really powerful barrier that's, you know, going to protect the company in the long run. And so I thought, okay, well, what about those bikes, the city bikes that, you know, all the corporate brands are on? And it was not something I ever thought about at all. And I don't even remember, I think I was talking to an investor and he said something about sponsors or something, and I'm like, no, we have nothing to do with that. But then I realized, what if every city we used corporate sponsors to launch our public-facing app, the LifeSpots app, and they get the benefit of being seen to do something good for the community. They pay for it. That pays for us to do marketing in order so that the people can download the app, and that inspires the nonprofits and government service providers to put their services in because they have a captive audience that they can communicate their services with. And that was such a totally random thing. It was such a huge change because I'm like, we're a tech company. We don't have anything to do with brand sponsorships, but in fact you have to pay for free, especially if nobody's writing $50 million checks as investors. So change is huge. And you said since we saw each other last, you've completely changed your focus, and I probably have changed mine 3 or 4 times in that period as well.
Yeah.
And I think all of you find that fairly easy to do, actually, which some people struggle with,
definitely.
to be fair.
Well, I mean, initially, the letting go of those initial ideas or initial proof of concepts is quite difficult. But once you realize, you know where you want to go, so you just need to pivot accordingly. And really react to the times. You know, there's timing is huge. For example, there's everything with women in VR or the diversity and inclusion has gained such a momentum with #MeToo and all of that. It's suddenly I think we've seen a perceptive shift where before it was kind of like no one approves of this, but you're not taking active steps. Whereas now it's kind of like we've gone from just a little bit of passive indifference to actual no, enough. This is not going to continue. And what are the tools that we're going to use to create a new sort of inclusive future?
And that opens a new door to a different direction in your business and how you can kind of ride that wave.
Who's the famous philosopher that said we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth? Who was that? Do you remember? It wasn't Einstein, was it?
But it's a good expression.
But it's a really, I mean, it kind of comes up at time and time and time again, isn't it? It's use your eyes to really look at what's happening, listen way more and then and then actually do the talking and the speaking. Anyway, on that we're going to have to wrap up now, guys. But just to say, we have a voting poll on our website. And the voting poll is basically just to keep people looking at who, if they were going to invest in somebody or something over the next period of 6 to 12 months, of all the disruptors that they meet. It's also for me to keep in touch with you and give you an update. And at the end of 6 months, the guy that's in the gold position, I say guy, I mean person that's in gold position, pole position, they're either going to co-present or they're going to present on Rip It Up, Start Again. So we've started to kick this off last session, episode 1, with Disruptive Live, and St John Deacons from Citizen Me, which I think some of you may know, he's in pole position at the moment. So we will get a board, it's all very Top Gear. We will get a board and we'll have you up there. But please vote, guys. Go to the website, vote for who you would invest in, and keep watching Rip It Up, Start Again. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you.